Good morning, everybody. Now it's time for something a bit special. It's not often you meet someone with enough determination to ignore circumstances beyond their control and still have the motivation to achieve their goals. Matt Speakman is on his way to making history by competing in the Porsche Carrera Cup next year. He becomes the first wheelchair-bound driver to compete on the racetrack. Matt Speakman is on his way to making history by competing in the Porsche Carrera Cup next year. He becomes the first person in a wheelchair to compete on the racetrack. Now, 19 years ago, Speakman was knocked off his motorbike by a drunk driver, resulting in a serious spinal injury. Earlier on the day of the accident, he had signed a deal to compete in the Australian 600 Super Sports Championship. Instead of chasing his dream, Matt spent 6 months in hospital being told he'd never race or walk again. The Confederation of Australia Motorsport refused to give him a licence, claiming he could not safely remove himself from the scene of an accident. But Speakman never gave up, and after 3 years of lobbying the Confederation, they decided to grant him a licence. In Australia, Matt Speakman is the only person competing in circuit racing with a major disability. Matt believes his story will create awareness for spinal cord injury research and is aiming to accomplish extraordinary goals in the future. And I'm glad to say Matt has joined us right here in the studio on Weekend Breakfast. Now, Matt, looking back on what you've achieved, how satisfying is that for you, not just as a racing car driver, but as a human being?
Oh, incredibly satisfying. A lot of what I started off doing was just trying to prove to myself that being in a wheelchair wasn't going to hold me back, and that I could still go out and enjoy all the things in life that I used to enjoy. And that's how this basically came about. And as things progressed, I found that I still had a talent for motorsport and was really competitive. So I just want to keep on going and try and get to the top. So
you were always a sporting nut as a youngster?
Always a sporting nut. Used to love cars, used to love motorbikes, always hassling Dad to go the windy way home, and I just love competing. It's just a part of my makeup, and it's what I love to do.
Well, let's go back to the future now. Back to that day, 1993. Can you take us through what happened?
Well, it's an incredibly strange set of circumstances that came about. I just completed Wayne Gardner's masterclass of motorcycle road racing, and through that I managed to get some sponsorship to go into the 1993 Australian 600 Super Sport Championship. I picked up the championship winning bike from the year before, put it in a mate's garage, went to work that night, and then got hit by a drunk driver on the way home from work. Next thing I know, I woke up in a hospital and I'm a paraplegic for life.
Were you by yourself that night?
Unfortunately, no. I did have a friend on the back of the bike, and unfortunately she did die in the accident. So
what was her name?
Maria.
Maria. And do you often think about Maria?
Every day of my life. Every day of my life, and everything I do, there's a little part of me that does it for her.
Now, speaking of your circumstances, do people, they're always entitled to feel angry within these circumstances. Just me reading the story, it really had me in a position where I was quite beside myself. How did you handle it, and was it easy to give into overwhelming feelings of negativity?
That was part of it, and actually that first period where I was in hospital and everything was negative, I was constantly being told what I can't do, and you don't think about doing this anymore, you can't do that anymore. And it got to a point where I was starting to really get a bit depressed about it. And there's one specific incident that I always will remember. I was just starting to really get a little bit down about it, and I noticed about 3 beds along from me there was a young guy who'd broken his neck quite high up, and they were teaching him how to use an electric wheelchair with a blow tube. And at that instance I thought, wow, things could have been a hell of a lot worse. And from that moment it was like let's get on with it and get out there.
Who's your source of strength? I mean, there must be someone there that supports you emotionally and mentally through these times, because it's not just a physical injury, it has scars way beyond the body, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think just the want to compete and the want to go out and push yourself, I think that's my driving force at the moment. I mean, I've got great support now with McElrea Racing. Andy McElrea, he's come on board and is really supporting me, as well as the whole Porsche community. They've come on board as well and are really enthusiastic about me driving, and as I am for driving for them. So I think that's my driving force at the moment, would be that having those guys behind me and having that professional race team behind me is really giving me the confidence that I can get out there and start winning some championships.
Now, do you think that sort of outlook on life, you were raised with it, or do you think that sort of gradually happened because of your circumstances?
I think I was actually raised with it. I remember when I was 16 years of age, I was living down in Hobart, and my mum actually pulled me aside and said, look, you don't look like you're really happy, you don't seem to be doing much. Why don't you jump in your car and go and live up on the Gold Coast in the back of your car for 6 months and see how that goes. And I was always taught when I was growing up that I could do anything in the world, and if I put my mind to it, I could succeed.
Now, you were rejected for a licence by CAMS for 3 years. You lobbied, okay? That was the Confederation of Motorsport, right?
That's correct. That was back in 1995. I actually first started applying to CAMS for a race licence, and at that time I wanted to go to superkarts, which is a circuit racing, pretty similar racing speeds and braking markers and the same racetracks that I was actually racing bikes, and I thought that would be the easiest transition for me. Unfortunately, at the time, back in 95, most of the circuit racing was controlled by, if there was an incident, for instance, it was a localised yellow. So the rest of the race course was still going at full race speed. And CAMS were a little bit concerned, as was I, that if I did have an incident, then I wouldn't be able to remove myself from the scene of the accident, and one of the flag marshals would have to come out and put themselves in danger. So instead of CAMS saying, absolutely no, you can't go racing, they said, well, as an alternative, would you be interested in going into rallies, hill climbs or super sprints? And wanting to go back to national level motorsport, I decided to go into rallies, and that's when I started in 1998 in the New South Wales Rally Championship, and then in 99 in the Australian Rally Championship. And since then they've gone to full course yellow, so if there's an incident they stop the race completely, send out the safety car, clean up the accident, and then we can get going again. So that's the reason that I can actually get back out into circuit racing.
So in
now.
essence they've moulded the rules around there, they've changed it just a tad just to make it a little bit more accessible for them.
Yeah, exactly right. And those rules changed just in the course. I mean, you remember back in the old days of Bathurst where there'd be a tow truck in the middle of the racetrack and people still screaming past. I mean, the safety has come a long way in those days, so that's what's given me the opportunity to get back to circuit racing now.
Matt Speakman, I could sit here and talk to you all day, and I'm sure all our viewers have got a deep admiration for your story and where you're going. Good luck to you, and all the best of luck.
Thanks, Pasha.
Thank you.